So, good morning, everyone. Bon matin, tout le monde. We will be starting our day, so the meeting is officially called to order. I would look towards our distribution team as per the charter, if they can conduct the count so that we can have our quorum. So as mentioned, we have a few panels today, one on harm reduction strategies, one on systemic racism and advancing First Nations policing. We have this afternoon the long-term reform on child welfare, and any other time around that will be for decision-making and resolutions. To start us off this morning on our plenary harm reduction strategies on substance abuse, we have different people from a national, regional, and hyper-local level to talk to us about AFN mandates and current policy. We have people talking about their local land-based recovery and wellness centers, as well as urban and on-reserve approaches to the opioid crisis. We also have a special guest today with us, who is our closing speaker to highlight their 800-kilometer walk as part of the Healing Overcomes Past Experiences, their Hope Walk, where they walk to highlight the gaps in addictions and mental health services for First Nations in remote northern communities. To give you an idea of our speakers, we will be having an introduction from Regional Chief Andrea Paul, who is the health portfolio holder. We will then be going to Councillor Alan Lewis. So Alan's a proud member of the Okanagan Indian Band. During his 8 terms as a band councillor, he has focused on ideas and initiatives that benefit the membership. He currently sits on the Interior Health Authority Board of Directors and works with local, provincial, and federal governments to help innovative ways of delivering health services. He also served 2 terms as the co-chair of the Aboriginal Education Committee for School District 22. Alan and his wife have a blended family of 4 children and 5 grandchildren, and he lives on the Okanagan Indian Band Reserve near Armstrong, BC. He's also the BC representative on the Chiefs Committee on Health. We'll also have with us Chief Marc Arcan, who's with Saskatoon Tribal Council. Tribal Chief Marc Arcan is a member of the Muskeg Cree Nation and has called Saskatoon home for over 20 years. After serving as the STC's vice chief for 2 years, he was elected as tribal chief on October 19th in 2017, and again re-elected in 2020. Raised by his grandparents in Muskeg Lake, they taught him to treat all people to justly and to do what is right. His dedication towards reversing the intergenerational trauma brought on by residential schools and towards reconciliation are paramount in his work. And he's done this by promoting cultural education, supporting families and youth as a priority to have a quality life. Our third speaker with us will be Chief Shelley Bear of the Ogama-Iskwe, Chief of the Ojibwase Nation in Saskatchewan. Previously the head woman of the nation for 9 years, Chief Bear was elected in 2023. Since then, she's worked tirelessly within her community to develop a strong nation through mental health support, economic development, and infrastructure, with her most recent announcement being a recovery and wellness center within the nation that she will be speaking to us on. And finally, our final speaker will be Samantha Powderhorn, who's a professional speaker, life coach, and student at Yellow Quill University College, where she's studying First Nations addiction and mental health. She's a member of Tidul Lake Saisi Dene First Nation, and she's walked a powerful journey to recover from addiction, abuse, neglect, and poverty, choosing to break that cycle, where she transformed her life physically, mentally, and spiritually. Through her vulnerability and her storytelling, Samantha inspires others facing similar challenges. Her recovery also led to her to running, where she was featured in Canadian running magazine's Under Armour Diversity Series and as a guest on multiple podcasts. And she's here to talk about, as I said earlier, her Hope Walk. So I would now turn the floor over to our Regional Chief, Andrea Paul, who will be leading this discussion. Regional Chief Paul.
Thank you, Cedric. Good morning. Nindalawisi Andrea Paul, Wedebeksi, Pictou Land and First Nation. My name is Andrea Paul, and I come from Pictou Landin First Nation of the Mi'kma'ki Territory. I just wanted to give thanks to the Treaty 1 Territory for welcoming us here to host our national gathering, and also many thanks to all my colleagues for the opportunity to speak today. So, I'm so short. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge all those who have been impacted by the toxic drug crisis. I think we could all raise our hands and say that we know of someone that has been impacted by the drug crisis. To those who are working on the front lines of these crises, your work heals and fosters hope. Your voices are the catalyst for change and a driving force and foundation upon which we build healthy futures for all our First Nations. I recognize that this can be a difficult conversation, and I want to acknowledge our knowledge keepers in the room who are here to assist us. There is also a mental wellness room located downstairs in room MR7. Our communities carry deep knowledge about what works for their own healing, yet it is often constrained by colonial systems that do not honor our values, priorities, or paths to wellness. Harm reduction approaches are deeply rooted in our traditional ways and values. It means approaching each person in our community with respect, compassion, and care, and never with judgment. Harm reduction is about protecting life and creating the conditions where healing can begin. It honors the principles of caring for all, recognizing the worth of every life and promoting wellness for the whole community. Governments must work with First Nations in genuine partnership to advance solutions that are designed, delivered, and governed by our communities at every stage of care. It is imperative that no one is left behind. Supporting our frontline workers is non-negotiable. They are too often overburdened, carrying the responsibility of caring for our people, sometimes without the sufficient support for their own wellness. Investing in them is investing in the future of First Nations health and wellness. Despite the tremendous loss or hurt we have experienced, we continue to move towards hope, meaning, belonging, and purpose. Let's honor those who have been affected, not just with words, but with actions and investments. We have 4 speakers with us today who are here to speak to the initiatives that are taking place in their First Nations and communities. It is important we are able to share and learn from one another's experiences, tragedies, and their successes. So panelist 1 is Councillor Alan Louie. With that, I'd like to introduce Councillor Alan Louie, a member of the AFN Chiefs Committee on Health. So his question for today is, healing requires support, innovation, and guidance. How have woven traditional Okanagan practices and values into harm reduction programs within your community, and what impact have these approaches had on healing, safety, and connection?
Good morning, everyone. White Husk Hall. Name's, like I said, Alan Lewis, member of the Okanagan Indian Band and a member of council for way too many years. I think I got elected back in the 90s somewhere. So anyways, to Today I wanted to talk a little bit about community healing, but just before I get to that part, I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight of what's happening in British Columbia. Last year, 3,400 First Nations experienced a toxic drug poisoning. Of those 3,400 First Nations, 427 of them died. Of those 427, 168 of them, which is 40% approximately, were females. That's alarming. Another alarming stat is that 49% of the people that died in British Columbia were 40 years old and older. First Nations people in British Columbia are 6 times higher, have a higher rate of dying than any other British Columbia resident. And even worse, at 11.6% are females. This is tragic. So I just want to kind of talk about what we're doing in British Columbia at the provincial level, and then I'll go to our community level. So quickly, what we're doing as First Nations Health Authority, we have done 105 harm reduction grants to communities. 397 people have completed not just naloxone training course. 5,426 nasal naloxone kits have been delivered to 112 communities. 1,742 virtual sessions with psychiatrists and addiction specialists. 4,041 First Nations people assessed with opioid agonist therapy and are currently using it. Toxic drug response tools, ceremony, culture, land-based healing to build connection and support grief and healing. Engagement with peer networks, drug alerts, emergency treatment bed pathways. We all know it seems like it takes a long time to get to a treatment center. So we're trying to streamline that, and we're working with the government of British Columbia and the health minister to make this happen in British Columbia. We have nurse practitioners that prescribe oat treatment, harm reduction, vending machines, development peer networks, addressing stigma around substance use. First, we must accept that it's a sickness and it's not something that's evil. While it may be evil and kill people, we've got to support our people to actually heal. So acknowledging that we all have this problem is one of our first steps. Support grief and healing in communities. We had a large summit for wellness and addictions last year as well. So with that, I'd like to shift and talk about what's happening in community. So in the Okanagan Silk Nation, we have many initiatives on the way. One of them is a good example, is that one of the communities is working with local community RCMP liaisons, the local health authority, which is Interior Health in the Silk area, First Nations, of course, regional team, the local city as well, but more importantly, we focus in community. So we look at community peers, elders, and knowledge keepers. And what we do is we focus on healing at home. While we do use treatment centers, we actually have shifted and using treatment centers, but we also look at doing detox in communities. And that's a huge step. We know that doing detox on drugs is a lot different than it used to be when community members used to do detox in community for alcohol. It's a new world, but we've actually raised the bar, and our frontline workers have gotten more skilled and care about our people, that they've actually made that commitment to work with them at home so that they're not waiting for a detox bed in a regional health authority, which sometimes can be, you know, a wait of sometimes a week or 2 weeks, which is sometimes end of life for many. One of the things that we really focus on too is that we do a lot of prevention work, programs in the community with the youth that connect them to the land, the culture, and the language. We do this by engaging our elders and knowledge keepers to make sure that that connection is there, which is game-changing because a lot of our youth actually live on their phones, as you know, or on our computers. So disengaging them electronically and getting back to the land has been one of the major positive steps that we've taken. Not saying that they still don't go on the computers and phones, they do, but less. They have important lessons to learn from our elders and knowledge keepers. We also work with people to understand intergenerational trauma. And this, of course, comes from residential schools, the 60 Scoop, but also it continues every single day with racism. And this happens whether you're in a community or a local city or even in a local hospital. Unfortunately, it still happens, and there's still healthcare providers that don't take care of our people like they should. We're working hard with the health authorities, and I'm actually, like I said, I'm on one of the British Columbia regional health authorities, and one of my focus is cultural safety for our people. So make sure that our voices are heard and that sufficient training happens to every single member of the health authority. In my health authority, I think we have 28,000 employees. And the other good news is that because our push for having safer service for people, the health authority has made a big commitment to actually hire First Nations. So in our neck of the woods, we have just over 2,000 First Nations working for the health authority. They actually are so keen on getting people to work for a health authority. They're actually not only recruiting out of universities, they're recruiting and looking at high school kids that might want to actually have a health career. So they're actually recruiting even better than all of us to make sure that they get the numbers they want, which is 10% of the workforce at Interior Health. The other thing I wanted to mention about racism in communities, or outside our communities, is that we recognize that it happens everywhere. We have a cultural school that our students go to. It's almost all First Nations and almost all Silk people, but we have, we're integrated, so we do have a few non-First Nations going to our school. One of the things that our students have to deal with when they leave a safe place like our school, our cultural school, is they transition into high schools or post-secondary schools. They face the real reality of dealing with racism. Our school has actually worked to give our students tools to deal with racism, so when they leave the safe confines of our cultural school, they have extra tools to deal with people that make racist comments or do other things that are even more harmful. One of the things that I think every community and treatment center that I've talked to says the biggest problem isn't the people in treatment, it's actually the people when they leave treatment. You can give a person all the tools they need to be successful when they leave the treatment center or they leave that healing place on the land and they go back to their homes. Well, we know a lot of our homes are overcrowded and have a lot of people living in them, and unfortunately, lots of times they're not a safe home. In British Columbia, when we talk about social determinants of health, there's a whole gamut of things that makes a healthy person. You have your unemployment, your education, your access to safe health, and at the middle of it all, and there's many things, but the middle of it all, every health worker will tell you, you've got to have a safe home. And this is a big problem in First Nation communities. In one of our communities, we've had and I'm thinking of Penticton, that community actually bought homes so that they can actually have people move into a safe home after they come from treatment center or on the land healing. So that gives them a safe a place to recover and to get stronger so they can deal with those everyday attacks from people that are still doing that addictions road. One of the things that I think we look outwards a little bit in the Okanagan, and Interior Health has actually worked with BC Housing, and they have a large apartment buildings that they actually have for people going through addictions and living on the streets. They move them into these facilities after they've gone through treatment and stuff like that. And they just don't leave them in these buildings to actually live and try to figure it out. They actually do wraparound services with these people so that the success rate is a lot higher. And this also happens in the city of Victoria, where the mayor took, I think, the 100 most vulnerable people off the streets and ran them through programs. And one of the programs that worked the best was actually on the land healing. So they incorporated it into their program, but the other thing was the safe housing. So Victoria, the city of Victoria has done the same work that we're kind of doing in our community too. So the program does work, but you need to support people not only going to treatment center, in treatment, but post-treatment. So I wanted to actually, I can't say enough about how important it is, and how we get there is going to take some work with the housing and capital people. The last thing I want to say, not the last thing, but one of the things I want to say is that, before I get to the last thing, is the issue communities are having with drug houses. And we all have them in our community, or maybe we all don't, but majority of us have them in our communities where people are actually selling drugs out of their homes. It used to be at one time, if you wanted to get access to hard drugs, you left our communities and you went into the local city and got what you needed to get to help you deal with the trauma that you're going through. Now we have these homes right in our communities. So our community is going through the whole process of looking at how we can move people from drug houses, whether they're a member from OKIB or they're a member, a non-member, and have them removed. We know other communities have done it, and it's not easy because you're asking families to remove, you know, your brothers, your fathers, your sons, uncles, daughters, aunts. It is a hard thing to do, but you know what? At some point, we've got to actually realize the safety of the community is more important than the individual. Last thing I'd like to say, I want to say and acknowledge thank you to all the frontline workers that get up and do that hard job every single day. They go unrecognized. We look at the number of people that die and think about, you know, we're failing and stuff like that. Well, we are failing in some sorts, but there are people with limited amount of resources that get up and save lives every single day in our community. And I want to acknowledge them, and I hope everybody else will say thank you to the people in your community that are doing this hard work. And I know they save lives, and I appreciate them. White Lim Lim.
Thank you so much for your words. Thank you, Councillor Louis, for all of your shares today. I took some great notes. I also have a gift for you. I don't think I have a gift.
Thank you again.
You got busy there, and I was still talking. Sorry about that. I should have waited. Next, I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Chief Shelley Bear. Chief Shelley's question is, access to services and programs is key to reducing harm. How is your community working to integrate mental health, culture, and ceremonies and harm reduction in building a strong, I don't know how, Oka Nation. I'll let you say that because I don't want to destroy that word. I should have asked ahead of time. Thank you, Chief Shelley. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ogama Esqueo Shelley Bear from the Ochapowace Nation in southeast Saskatchewan. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that we gather today on the unceded, unsurrendered lands of the Treaty 1 peoples here. And especially, and I honor the elder ancestors, the elders, the knowledge keepers, survivors, and families, especially those that are still struggling and healing from addictions and from trauma. I thank you for making space to hear about the topic that touches every one of our nations, addictions, recovery, harm reduction, and the path forward, grounded in our Cree values and led by our communities. I know just recently, well, I won't say just recently, in Ochapowace Cree Nation, we've been struggling for addictions, we've been struggling with losses for many years. And you know, we have significant challenges since government restricted our members restricted our nation members and right across Turtle Island to, designated plots of land, severing our connections to our ancestral lands and traditional practices, and this forced isolation which included broader colonial practices that further harmed and caused trauma for our people. And I always say our trauma and our grieving started over 150 years ago when our lands were taken from us, when our Mother Earth was taken for us. That's when our grieving started. Our traumas existed long before residential schools, long before the 60s scoop, day schools, and other practices that the governments have put on our people. I just want to as well say the other harms that it took, and I speak quite a bit with regards to this, was the persecution of our ceremonies. The Indian Act outlawing our ceremonies that our people practiced for hundreds and hundreds of years and having to go in hiding, to help our people. I know my grandfather always said, and even when treaties were signed, that the ceremonies came first. That's what came. That's where we got our answers from the ancestors, from our grandmothers who come to us in ceremony and guide us and provide us the wisdom to carry on, and those practices were outlawed in order to help our people that were going through trauma, that were going through addictions. It's not just about addiction. It's about pain, it's about loss, and it's about systems that disconnected us from who we really are. And I think going back to our ceremonies, going back to our way of life we are as First Nations people is one of the first steps that we need to take. I know we went through, as I said, in Ochapowace, we're called a state of emergency. And I know it's not only in Ochapowace that these state of emergencies have been called, it's been right across Canada and our First Nations right across, for suicides, for overdoses, losing our people, our young warriors, young ones that we as parents and grandparents, we want to see grow to have gray hairs, and we're losing them without even growing one, I say. But those are the things challenges that we're going through as Ochapowace, and it was going into those places to get that strength through those ceremonies, to find those answers, and to get that help, and for the Creator to take pity on our people. Where it wasn't our fault. And I said, and I had meetings with Minister Scott Moe, and told them the challenges, but it's not only challenges in First Nations communities now anymore, it's challenges in the cities, in the towns, in the rural areas. It's right across our provinces. And he understood. He finally understood those words, and he was, gifted us with a treatment center after many years of fighting by our previous leaders to get a treatment center up to 20 beds. One of the challenges and I know he had mentioned, because we have, if people aren't sure where we're located, we're actually in southeastern Saskatchewan, probably just 4 hours from here, close to in the Qu'Appelle Valley. And we do have urban lands by Regina. And he had talked about, that's where you can put your treatment center, is in these urban lands by Regina. And it was like, that's not where our people heal. That's not our position moving forward if we are having a treatment center. Our people heal off the land, going back to Mother Earth and learning those ways of life, learning the lives, learning how Mother Earth lives is how we should live. And that's where our people are going to heal, is back home off the lands. And I guarantee you, Mr. Moe, that your people will heal as well. Those are where we need to go back. So we are working towards that treatment center. One of the challenges that we have is infrastructure. So I've reached out to federal government. Again, in Saskatchewan, the response that I got back in the opioid that's our pandemic. COVID was a pandemic, losing people. The opioid crisis across Canada, I believe that's a pandemic. And those were the arguments that I put forward to the federal government in arguing and helping build our treatment center. The response that we're getting back in Saskatchewan is we're not building any more treatment centers, even though we're in a pandemic, even though we're suffering significant losses. Well, we only have funding to fund the ones that are in operations right now. So that's our biggest challenge, is building the facility. I know industry has contributed, and Mosaic was the Mosaic Potash Company was a big, huge example of industry coming forward and putting forward $500,000 towards helping us build our treatment center, but we know that's not enough. But those are, when we talk about challenges as leaders, those are what we face, not only the losses, not only going to those streets, I said going into those trap houses and looking for family members that phone and ask, Chief, my daughter, my son, my nephew, my grandchild is in a trap house here in Regina, a trap house here in Saskatoon, and going and knocking down those doors and getting them out of there. And you know what? A lot of those are some of non-First Nations people that have our women, our young women and our young men trapped in those homes. You don't see them, but you walk in the door and you see those shoes at that door and you know who's in there. And those are the challenges that we face every day, trying to fight for our people and trying to get them back off those streets and reconnect them back to our homes, back to our people, back to our lands, and then having to fight government. It just seems like a circle to provide the necessary resources that we need. And I know that we talk about funding across Canada and the cutbacks. I said we've lost too many lives in First Nations country to continue on with the status quo. I admit many years ago I went to a treatment center and it was culturally based. It was out by the land and by the waters, and that's where you get that healing from, is off the land. That's where we go, and we go into those ceremonies and we talk to our ancestors. We go in those big lodges, the closest place that we are with the Creator, and ask for that help. And that's where we need to bring our young people to get them into that mindset, to come back to those spaces and reconnect and be proud young warriors that our ancestors always envisioned for us to be. And I know they outlawed our ceremonies, but our old people still had them. Even though they knew they were going to be starved, they were going to be beaten, they were going to be thrown in jail, maybe killed, they still went and they had those ceremonies because they knew we were going to need them today. And that's what I always say, and that's the time of crisis is now, and it's time where we need to get back to those spaces to help our people, because like I said, we've had too many losses over the years, many years. So, you know, our ancestors, I always say, didn't exile those who struggled. They brought them into the circle. They practiced community-based healing, and that's true harm reduction strategy. So with that, I thank you for listening to me. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for each and every one of you, leaders, leadership, chiefs, council people that struggle with the losses in your community. My heart goes out to you. And you know, I know originally the question actually talked about, and I'm work a lot in economic development as well with my nation and partnerships. It referenced economic development, how we use economic development in harm reduction. I was saying I feel very uncomfortable putting money, making money off the trauma of our people. So it's more about, you know, leading with compassion and working together, because we all face the same challenges. And I thank our other panelists here for sharing their journeys and sharing what the struggles and challenges that they go through. And you know, at the end of the day, it's working together. Yesterday, I wasn't able to be here because I attended a funeral of a young man that again, lost to addictions on our First Nation. And I took time off and was on Zoom listening, came in by Zoom for the meetings yesterday, and you know, we got to try get along. At the end of the day, you know what, we all face challenges. We all need to try and get along and fight the fight for our people that are on those streets, to fight the fight for our elders who are in those homes that want to come home, to fight that good fight for our children that are in care, that want to come home, that have never touched our lands. Let's get along, because we'll continue to have trauma in our communities, we'll continue to have trauma in our cities if we don't work collectively together right across Turtle Island. So with that, I say thank you. Hi, hi.
Thank you so much, Chief.
I don't think I
Thank you so much, Chief Shelley, for all your words. Our third panelist, I'd like to introduce Tribal Chief Mark Arcand from the Saskatoon Tribal Council. So his question is, colonization, intergenerational trauma, and systemic discrimination has had lasting negative impacts on our people. How has addressing social determinants of health, like housing, helped reduce substance abuse and homelessness in your community, and what harm reduction strategies have proven most effective?
Nobody wanted to clap for me? Wow, what a tough crowd. Everybody's serious today. Good morning. Tansay, Nanaskaman Kakio, Pitaxinia Kotara, Treaty 1 territory. I'm from Treaty 6 territory, Musqueam Cree Nation. I have the honor of serving the Saskatoon Tribal Council and working for 7 First Nations. I'm not going to talk too much about what the other panelists spoke about, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak truth, honesty, integrity, and some of our sacred teachings about how we're dealing with this opioid crisis. One of our specialties that we never used to do in Saskatoon was homelessness until it came out of the pandemic. We've seen the increase of drug use, homelessness, abuse, all of the negativities that we can imagine from the areas of residential schools. When we talk about racism, these are true facts that happen to this day to me in Saskatoon. We run the largest homeless shelter in the province of Saskatchewan, 106 beds, led by a First Nations organization for everyone. The majority of our people, which we call relatives because we're all related, doesn't matter where you're from, you're all relatives, is about 85% of First Nations people. That's not Métis, that's not Inuit, that's First Nations people from across Turtle Island. We've had relatives right from USA being inside of our shelter, in our city, living on our streets. In 2022, we had 500 homeless people. 2024, it's gone up to 1,500, and it's growing rapidly. We see families inside of our shelter, 8 to 10 families a week. We cannot keep up with the work of getting them housed because we lack housing in the city of Saskatoon. We know the crisis of cost of food, rent, and everything for our people because our people live on fixed incomes. These are challenges that, I'm glad we're speaking here today about this because we need this table, our regional chiefs, our national chief, and all of our chiefs in this room, and our councillors in the back, and everybody that's here, to lobby government for these more investments to actually change the system. The system is what's hurting our people. When we talk about success, harm reduction is one of the hardest things that we're dealing with in the city of Saskatoon. In the province of Saskatchewan, they've taken away the harm reduction, needle exchange. We ran a needle exchange program, we still do. I've seen elderly people as old as 60 years old coming in to get needles. And to me, I said that wasn't right. They need help. I've seen kids as young as 16 coming to get needles. We had to stop that. They weren't eligible, they weren't allowed. And everyone else in between. What we've seen is a rise in HIV and AIDS in our communities, from the urban setting going back to our nations. This is a pandemic, but guess what? We're underfunded. I agree with Chief Shelley Bear. This is not about making money off homeless people or trauma or all the negative impacts. This is about saving lives. Some of the programs that we do in this organization, we work in the correctional system. We help men so they don't graduate to the federal penitentiary in Prince Albert. We work in there through programs, through mental health, through addictions. And here's a true story. I have a son who's 35. He was a full-fledged crystal meth addict. He is still currently on a sentence of probation till this December, in and out of jail for the past 6 years because of his addiction. He's like, Tribal Chief, Dad, can I have some money? For what? Well, I'm going to go eat. What does he do? Instead of going to eat, he goes and buys drugs. Cut him off. What did he do? Stealing, robbing to feed his habit. Ended up in jail. Through our program, we ask people to make a choice when they're willing to. Employment or education, we can help them. He wanted to go to school. He said, Dad, I want to do what you do. I want to help people. I want to make a difference. I want to give back. I'm tired of hurting people through addictions. This past year, he had the honor of graduating from SIT, still on a criminal sentence for mental health and addictions. He crossed the stage and he received a diploma. This Tuesday in September, he started post-secondary at the First Nations University of Canada for social work. Still on a sentence. He doesn't ask for fame or for glory. Well, what he does say is we can help people that want to change their lives because people need hope. They need opportunities. And when he was looking for a job, a lot of non-Indigenous organizations wouldn't hire him because of his criminal record. Well, guess what? A First Nations organization, the Saskatoon Tribal Council, we took a chance on people. He worked for us. He was a summer student. He worked in our homeless shelter as a peacekeeper. Nobody else is giving our people a chance to succeed in life except for our own organizations, our own communities. When we talk about Saskatoon, from our homeless shelter to actually housing families in a wraparound services like my friend from BC talked about, counselor. We have a 55-unit facility where families have to go through programming in order to live there. It's not intense. Could be AA meetings, could be NA. We're meeting them halfway. If somebody relapses, we don't kick them out. We work with them. What's their triggers? What's their opportunities? These are all the things that have success for people. And in that area, we had a young lady 3 years ago on the street, had nothing. Through our programs and services, she walked across the stage and received her grade 12. She lost her kids in care when she was in that state of mind. She got her kids back. Again, she works for us in our outreach program, Seweyatoten. Why? Because she wants to give back and help people. She got her learners. She's now getting her drivers. She's getting her own home. And she's not even from my tribal council. She's from another First Nation. But our values from our board of directors, our chiefs, is we help all people. And right now, guess what? She's employed with Saskatoon Tribal Council. She's our best employee because she knows everyone on the street. Everyone on the street. They say, I want to be the next Mona. And this is how we change the system, by investing in people. When we look at the successes of what we're doing, we've got to promote this model. Here's a true story. City of Saskatoon. How many of you have ever heard the word NIMBY in an urban setting? Not in my backyard, right? In Saskatoon, we were asked to put up a shelter. We put it in a neighborhood in the west side. We had a pastor, a non-Indigenous pastor, dead set against us having that shelter there. Why? Because it brought crime to his neighborhood. It did this, it did all the negative stuff, graffiti, people were urinating all over. Okay, yeah. So how do we help people? I had 4 open house meetings for that neighborhood, for the community of Saskatoon. That pastor ran for city council because he wanted to move us. Guess what? We're still there. We're full every day, 106 people. He's dead set against the First Nations organization helping our own people because it's in his backyard. That's the racism we face every day. And guess what? He got elected to be a city councillor. As his role as a city councillor this past year, in Saskatchewan, they have this big event called SUMA for all the urban mayors and councillors to meet with the Prime Minister, or to meet with the Premier and all the ministers. He stood up in a forum like this and said, he asked the Premier, can we have the operator move from this? This was your promise. The Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, said, nope, we're not moving the operator. I went public, I went to media, and I said, I called on the mayor and City Council to have this gentleman removed from the homeless file because he's not part of reconciliation. He's against reconciliation. Why are people so set against First Nations people helping our own people? We know what's best for our people. The colonial system is always dictating to us of how they're going to pat us on the head and take care of us. Well, we all know that system doesn't work. We know that. So we all got to stand up and we got to fight this system and change the system. Right now, this pastor doesn't talk to me because guess what? I just received funding for our facility for a $2 million upgrade for a brand new commercial kitchen, upgrades to our washrooms and our showers for people that are disabled so they can come and use our facility, new flooring, new everything in that facility. We're not going anywhere because we stayed true to helping people as our #1 priority, and they're still upset in the city of Saskatoon. And to me, that's a win because we're going to make a difference in people's lives. I'm going to stand up against racism. I'm going to stand up against the abuse of our people. And I'm going to stand up about how we're not being supported when we need supports to help our people, because this system where our people are in, we didn't create this. It was forced upon us through assimilation and all the negativity that we know. And for me, we need to do two things. The regional chiefs are here, national chief and all the chiefs. We got to change some laws. Think about this. This is uncomfortable to hear, but this is what we deal with all the time in Saskatoon. And I know we deal across Canada as well. When somebody pulls a gun on somebody and kills somebody, they get charged for murder, they get sentenced. But when somebody's selling drugs to our people and they die through an overdose for that $5 little hit, they're not charged with anything. We've got to clean up our streets. We've got to get the drugs off the streets because that's what's killing our people. And harm reduction is really being a piece of negativity that's really impacting our people's lives. Unfortunately, it's our people that are doing this to our people, and we've got to hold our people accountable because we're losing too many loved ones to this whole negative system. So for me, when I think about what we're doing, how we're doing it, we have a model that we can present to a lot of people if they're interested. You can add to it, you can delete it. And the gains to all of this is this. We have 3 major hospitals in Saskatoon through our Swayatoton program. In the winter time, when it gets to be -30 like Winnipeg, our hospitals are filled with our people because they don't have places to go. We have a Swayatoton outreach program where the Saskatchewan Health Authority has paid for us to go and get people, to get them to services. So we find them shelters, we find them hotels, we provide services to them, we do all of this stuff. We have an outreach team that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week during the winter months to drive around the city when a business calls us to go and get our people so we can get them to services. So when we think about these key areas about what we're missing in an urban setting, because a lot of our people are transient back to the communities, this is how we have to really fix the problem. When we think about overdoses that are dying in our city, people can't believe, non-Indigenous people can't believe that our staff that have worked with that individual that has passed away and their family to go to their funeral. Non-Indigenous people don't do that. They don't go to our communities because our people care enough through our organization that they bought into our system to say we're going to go and support that family because somebody has died. Because our staff have made that connection to being close to that family and really trying to support them. So when we think about working together collaboratively, we are underfunded in these programs. And I think at the end of the day, if there's a vision for the AFN and everybody is to actually advocate for more funding, this would be great to really support it. It's not about making money off our people like Chief Shelley Bear said. This is about saving people's lives. So I wish everybody a great day. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great couple days in Winnipeg, and let's all be safe. Hi, Nanaskman. Thank you. It's all good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for sharing your personal stories also. The next panelist, our final panelist, is Samantha Powderhorn. So her question is, how does storytelling and sharing lived experiences help break stigma and encourage others to seek help for substance use challenges?
Witsia, good morning. First, I would like to acknowledge the treaty lands we are on. My name is Samantha Powderhorn, and I am a proud member of the Sayes-Udena First Nation, and I'm a student at Yellow Quill University College. On November 21st of 2021, I woke up with a massive hangover and a pounding headache. I walked through my home, I could see the mess and the smell of alcohol lingering in my home while my children were playing. At that moment, I knew I was repeating cycles from when I was growing up. At that moment, it brought back a lot of memories and a lot of emotions. Memories of abuse, neglect, poverty, feelings of alone, unloved, unworthy. And at that moment, I decided to start my journey of recovery and sobriety. Through my recovery, I started my running journey and my healing journey. Through my journeys, I have learned many things. I've learned about myself and the crisis with addictions and mental health. My trauma has inspired me to quit my finance assistant job and to be a student for the First Nations Addictions and Mental Health. And I just finished my first year and had my first day back of my second year yesterday. Through personal experience and through my studies is when I realized the barriers and the gaps for the supports, resources, treatment, aftercare, and building a safe space for our relatives in the communities, especially those in the remote northern communities. It is then I decided to have a conversation with my partner. I'm like, let's walk from Thompson to Winnipeg to raise awareness for addictions and mental health, not just to raise awareness in that field, but to also call for action, number 21 of the Truth and Reconciliation, to fill in those gaps and barriers for healing centers in remote northern communities. So I approached where I was working for my practicum in the summer, and I delivered this idea, this plan, and they were on board. I then started planning, and me and my partner went to Thompson on August 16th, and we started walking on August 17th to Winnipeg, the Forks. It took us 15 days to run and walk 768 kilometers to raise awareness for this important matter. This movement was brought by passion, experience, and seeing the huge need for our relatives who are suffering in silence. And it is then I knew that telling your story is so important, because we are storytellers. We have our truths, and we keep those truths in because we're afraid of being ashamed or judged or labeled. We should be able to have a space to say and tell our story with truth. And that's what I did along my journey. We shared stories, and at the amount of messages that I received thanking me is very honorable, and I'm very humbled by it. The Hope movement, hope standing for healing overcomes past experiences, is just a beginning. Is just a beginning of something that is going to mean something someday. And because of my journey of recovery and healing, it taught me the importance of leading for our relatives who can't speak, who are afraid, and who are struggling. I am speaking from my experience. So we have to learn how to build a safe space for our relatives, because those struggling with addictions and mental health have their truths, have their stories, and maybe just sitting with them for 2 minutes can save their lives. I saw it in March when I went back to my remote northern community. I was there for 2 weeks and I saved 3 people. And it was so eye-opening. Being in an isolated community, you are already isolated, and that already is a huge factor of leading to something that makes you feel comfortable. As I go on into my studies, I really do this heart work with compassion, empathy, and love. And I noticed also is that we have to, as Indigenous folks, start helping our Indigenous relatives across the nation. We are losing them a lot. And we all have our stories, and we're all affected by the trauma, the intergenerational trauma, and that is somewhere where we have to start. And building a healthy space, more trauma-informed approaches, more harm reduction approaches is a way to go from my experience and my perspective. So I don't think I have any more things to say, but I'm really happy and I'm very thankful for KTC Chief Walter for supporting and encouraging this important movement. Walter and George have been the eye of the movement. My partner, Luther, who has walked with me along the way, the staff, all of the support and love on the social media. Thank you for having me to tell my story, and thank you for listening to me. Masicho.
Oh my God, I almost cried. Sorry. Wow, whew, that was so beautiful. I was just telling her, I said, I took everything for me to keep my tears and listening to her journey, because it really has us reflecting back on our journeys and you know, the things that we've overcome growing up. So thank you for your your strength and your truth. And I admire you so much. So I wanted to say thank you to our speakers today. I did just want to highlight a couple of things. You know, we heard about the social determinants of health and the need for safe housing. We really need to advocate for safe housing for our people, not just in our communities, for also in our urban centers. So I just wanted to flag that. I also wanted to talk about ceremonies and how ceremonies come first. And you know, when Chief Shelley talked about connecting with the lands and paying attention to how Mother Earth looks after herself, and it's so true. When we watch how Mother Earth even recovers from maybe environmental devastation and we let her heal, we see that. And so that is so natural, and how we need to go back to the lands and use the lands for our healing journeys. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that. You know, Chief Mark, when you talked about your story with your son, I just wanted to acknowledge your truth sharing and, you know, making those connections for us and letting us know that I think giving people a chance is really so instrumental. And I see that when people give addicts, someone that's been in trouble with the law, a chance to do something, because really at the end of the day, they really want to help others. And I see that happen in my community. So thank you. We need to invest in our people. And I never knew what NIMBY meant. I've seen it. So when you said it, I was like, oh, not in my backyard. Okay, so thank you for that. And Samantha, oh my God, you're the sweetest. Oh my gosh. I talked to her a little bit before we started, and I shared a little story with her about someone in my family who I've watched be rock bottom to now being a healer and a helper in my community. And she's my cousin, and how proud I am of her. And I said, I would love for you two to connect and chat. And I did have closing remarks, but I'm not going to say those. I just wanted to recap on that because they were such wonderful, powerful messages today. And I wanted to give thanks to you all for sharing your journeys and sharing your insight with all of us. Wilalio. Thank you.
So again, thank you to all our speakers. And just as a quick reminder, we do know that these subjects are somewhat heavy, and I think we've all been touched personally by them. So there are a few different things that are there to support you. So obviously we have the Hope for Wellness line. You'll see the number pass a few times during the day. We also do have a wellness room, just a quiet space you can go and just be with yourself in MR7. So that's on the first floor, almost directly under us. And as well, I just want to recognize and hold up the knowledge keepers that have been here with us, who are available to talk to, but also who have been smudging the room and keeping this energy good with us. So I will now move on for our next point to our co-chair, Véronique.
Donc, le prochain panel de discussion est sur le racisme systémique et les policing, la législation chez les Premières Nations. So the next panel is and plenary session is on First Nations systemic racism and policing. It will open with a portfolio update from the regional chiefs that are holding this portfolio on justice and policing. So I will start by passing the microphone to Regional Chief TG from British Columbia.
Thank you. Merci. Denizat, Sekuzat, Skyzat. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the territory of the Treaty 1 people and want to acknowledge the rightful owners of these lands, the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Lakota, and Dene peoples here. I just want to acknowledge Willie Moore for being such a gracious host, hosting us here in Winnipeg for this AFN AGM. This next plenary session is about justice and policing. Really important matter that we just discussed here. One of the things in British Columbia too, as well, that should be talked about in terms of unnatural deaths with opioids and other matters about health is the fact that in British Columbia as well, our life expectancy in the last 5 years went from 73 to 67. So it really speaks to the issues of the opioid crisis, also other issues in terms of health. In this seat, I've been here, I've become, I guess, one of the elder statesmen. I've been here 8 years, serving my third term as a regional chief, and since I've been here, one of the files that I did take is this one, Justice and Policing. During this time, the previous regional chief of Quebec and Labrador is Ghislain Picard. I want to acknowledge all his years, and you know, he's become you know, much more than just a colleague as a regional chief. He's since left his position, and now we have Francis Vero-Paul here as a regional chief from Quebec and Labrador. His 33 years at the AFN. Also want to acknowledge this medallion here. Want to acknowledge the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. The last time I was here in Winnipeg was in February of 2024. I had the opportunity to meet with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the late Chief Kathy Merrick, who gifted this to me. I came to talk about the issue of governance treaties, but also the issues of competing rights, in particular with the Métis here, because that's some of the issues that we're dealing with in British Columbia. There is no Métis lands in British Columbia, and this is one of the issues that we're trying to deal with. And the other matter at that time, in February of 2024, was the searching for missing and murdered women and girls, and the search, as you well know, of the landfill for our loved ones, and certainly there was a great outcome, as you heard, in the finding and the push from the likes of Chief Merrick and yesterday, as you well heard, from Premier Wab Kinew to search those sites, to search for our loved ones. In this matter, in this panel, we're going to discuss justice in terms of where we're at the AFN, but also talk about the issue of policing. At our last assembly in December, I stood alongside National Chief and the mothers of Chantel Moore. Chantel is an Indigenous woman who died at the hands of police, New Brunswick police. She's from Talokia, out of British Columbia, but lived in New Brunswick. John Wells, who died in Calgary. Last year, just to note, was one of the worst years we've seen for death in custody, especially in the last half of 2024. We saw approximately 9 of our First Nations people die in the hands of police, of some sort of police force. All told, I believe there was approximately 18 last year. And we held a press conference highlighting the many recent deaths in terms of First Nations people at the hands of federal, provincial, and territorial police officers, and calling for a national inquiry into systemic racism in policing. Certainly, as I stated, there was many deaths last year and years before, including myself, you know, my relative Everett Patrick at the hands of the RCMP in Prince George, Dale Culver, Wet'suwet'en, Gitxaanmen in Prince George as well, in Campbell River, Jared Lowndes. Some of these were investigated by the British Columbia IIO and were recommended for charges. but the Crown prosecution in British Columbia didn't deem it fit to go ahead, and most of those charges that were laid against some of these police officers in British Columbia were dropped. And that certainly isn't justice for the likes of my extended family or any of those families out there across this country. So certainly we know this isn't an isolated issue, but a pattern of experience by First Nations people across this country. Every day, the interactions with policing and justice services. Throughout the spring federal election, we continued to call on Canada to take urgent action, and we will continue to urge Prime Minister Carney, Minister of Public Safety, and the Attorney General. So public safety is former Cernak Minister Gary Anna-Desangri, and the Attorney General is used to be Minister of Housing is Scott Fraser. Support for First Nations-led national inquiry into systemic racism in policing. It is essential that Canada recognize the urgency of this issue, and we must stop the continued systemic racism embedded in the justice system that only harms our people. Recently, also in terms of justice, systemic racism is not isolated to policing. We know that it is prevalent throughout the justice system. Earlier this summer, in June, I was pleased with the National Chief and also our chair from the British Columbia First Nations Justice Council, Corey Wilson, to release the AFN First Nations Justice Strategy. The Justice Strategy is aligned with the Federal Indigenous Justice Strategy released earlier this year. It includes 2 overarching paths along with 25 strategies carrying corresponding action items. The strategy seeks to revitalize First Nations laws and legal systems and to reform the criminal justice system. I commend the BC First Nations Justice Council, which was really born out of the First Nations Leadership Council, which is the BACFN, the First Nations Summit, and the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and is currently implementing the BC First Nations Justice Strategy. This has resulted in a widespread expansion of justice supports for First Nations in British Columbia. The BC First Nations Justice Council now operates 17 Indigenous justice centres across the province of BC. However, the First Nations Justice Strategy cannot be implemented without sufficient long-term predictable funding and explicit federal and political will to support these First Nations-driven initiatives. We continue to see the success of the Provincial Justice Strategy that has been backed by provincial government and provincial funding, and that was announced in March of 2020. It is key that Canada acknowledge this requirement to fulfill their obligations outlined in the strategy and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the United Nations Declaration Act, which is also one of my portfolios here at the Assembly of First Nations. I just want to also acknowledge during this work over the last several years, David Lametti, who was also very supportive of the Indigenous Justice Strategy, implementation of the United Nations Declaration Act, and who really contributed to some of the resources that we see in British Columbia. I will now turn to my colleague, Regional Chief Francis Rowe-Paul from AFNQL to speak on First Nations policing. Thank you all. Masai cho.
Thanks for welcoming me. First time addressing this assembly. Like Regional Chief TG mentioned, I'm the new Regional Chief of Quebec-Labrador, and it's a real honor and a very humbling experience to stand here today. I want to start by recognizing that we are gathered here today on Treaty 1 territory, the original territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Anisinu, Dakota, Lakota, Dene people. I really want to thank them for welcoming us. I am Pekwagime Innu. I'm from the Innu Nation, and I'm and also want to thank National Chief for giving me the opportunity to be one of the chief portfolio on these very important files for our nations. And I also want to thank Regional Chief TG for welcoming me on those files, and I'm real honored to be standing beside him and to advocate for these very important topics. Before I start, I was listening to Premier Quenu yesterday, and he mentioned something that really, I felt the same way. I've been participating to this assembly for now a few years, and I've had the honor to work beside former Regional Chief Ghislain Picard, and just want to say that it's a real honor to join my voice to all of you. And I really want to recognize the work for all previous leaders and for the leaders that are still doing that work and the leaders that will come after us. And I just hope that I'll be able to bring new ideas and new solution, innovative solution. And like I said, I take this mandate very seriously, and thank you again, and thanks to the chief of my region for giving me for giving me this opportunity to be here as the regional chief. And Wab was saying, Premier Quenu was saying yesterday that he came here when he was young, same for me. And I was hoping that maybe one day it could be me. And again, today is the day, so I'm just here to support all of you, all of your work, and I'm extremely honored. And I've always been, I think it's really important to recognize all the works of our previous leader. And I just want to take 1 minute for acknowledging the work of Ghislain Picard. At the AFN level, 33 years as regional chief, and he's been my mentor. He still is, and I just want to thank him for all of his work that he did throughout this year. So I'll do it in French. Je veux juste reconnaître, avant de débuter, le travail exceptionnel que le chef de la PNQL pendant 33 ans, Ghislain Picard, a fait ici à la PN, à l'Assemblée des Premières Nations, et de mener de front tous les importants dossiers pendant toutes ces années, et aussi de trouver cette force et cette énergie de mobiliser l'ensemble de nos nations sur des sujets aussi importants. Donc je veux vraiment reconnaître tout son travail aujourd'hui, et je veux le remercier, bien sûr. So on the police, First Nation police reform, while Canada police reform must address the racism in their own house, we also need to support our own First Nation police forces and ensure they have the resources and tools to ensure our community are safe. The First Nation court cases, which we will learn about during this session, make clear that First Nation police services are consistently and systematically underfunded and undersupported. We need legislation that recognizes First Nation policing as an essential service, providing those basic legal protection enjoyed by non-First Nation police services. And the first day when I got elected, I've been talking about this, about legislative reconciliation. I think this is the time where governments need to really implement legislative reconciliation. Back home, instead of pretty much systematically going to courts whenever we do assert our rights, governments should work with us on that legislative level. And when governments this is my personal definition, but whenever government says nation to nation, I think this goes through legislative reconciliation, because this is the way that it does recognize the sovereignty of our nations and our inherent rights. So I'll keep working on that. I think with the chief of our nation, of our region, this is something that we're really trying to implement with both governments. And critically, this legislation must ensure the delivery of policing services that are adequate, effective, and culturally responsive to the needs of First Nations. We also need to address the chronic underfunding of First Nation policing. While emergency services designation will help provide basic protection, we know existing funding models under Canada First Nation Policing Program continue to fall well short of true needs, and its reform is long overdue. As it stands, FNPP is administered through tripartite agreements that give little, if any, room to First Nation to specify their needs. In a specific case, recent court decisions have found that renegotiation of the funding agreements were in violation of the principle of good faith and a failure to uphold the honor of the Crown. Funding for First Nation policing needs to start with the basic question: what does your community need to ensure a safe and a secure community for your people? I will continue advocating for a legislative framework and funding models that are culturally responsive, adequately funded, community-led, and based on First Nation-owned priorities and requirements, not narrow federal policy. Thank you all for this first opportunity, and I will now turn to Véronique for the panel. Thank you, everyone. Miigwech.
Tinesh Komitin, merci Francis de suivre les pas de Ghislain, puis aussi de représenter une nouvelle génération, une jeune génération de leaders dans nos communautés. Donc, thank you Francis for representing our young generation of leaders at this table. So we will now continue with, I'd like to present the first presenter, Chief Patsy Corbière, Tribal Chair of the United Chiefs and Councils of Manitou-Minising and Chief of Odek Omnicoming First Nation. She is joining us by Zoom. She just appeared on the screen. Chief Corbière advocates for equal and equitable community safety for First Nations. Welcome, Chief Corbière. I will give you the time to speak.
Okay, Miigwech. I just want to say Ani bonjour. I just want to thank the Treaty 1 territory. I know I couldn't make it out there this time, but I wish I was. I've been Chief of Ondik-Dominiconing First Nation for 15 years, served on Council for 18, and Tribal Chair of the UCCM Tribal Council for the past 10 years. Why I mention these timeframes, it's not to lift me up, but I feel that the First Nation perspective on policing is at the same point that we were 30 years ago as it relates to inadequate funding for policing and a lack of response from the federal government. Let's not fool ourselves. The safety of our First Nations has stopped with the federal government. Resolutions, negotiation tables have not worked. We're at a standstill. The only way that the government moves is to pursue court action. And as they mentioned, the UCCM Tribal Police Ops and Treaty 3 filed a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal against the government. Currently, this case has been stalled due to the federal election and continues to be not dealt with. Are we surprised by that outcome? We have movement at the provincial level if we endorse the police service agreement, and this has been discussed. The policing landscape in the First Nation communities faces several significant challenges today, and we heard it throughout this presentation. Recruitment is difficult, overcrowding police stations that look like sardine cans with no room for growth. We had to take risks by not signing a renewal funding agreement that puts extreme stress on our police chief, officers, civilian staff, and had our funding cut off. The First Nation members' perspective on policing is at a critical stage. We live in a modern world made up of the opiate and mental health crises with the lack of facilities to deal with the state of emergencies in all our First Nations. We all experience the same crises, the drug issues and the deaths. With the migration of drug dealers coming into our First Nation from urban centers, community safety is a huge concern. Most of the drug dealers are under the age of 18, carrying handguns and other weapons. Housing units have now become illegal drug stores. Obituaries in our local papers clearly indicate the number of young people that overdosed and died with 3 or 4 young children left behind. That's our future. Those are our future that have passed away. Child welfare cases have increased with grandparents having to raise children of the deceased. So we need to ask ourselves, well, how do we create safety for our communities with a lack of adequate funding for policing? Federal public safety are talking about legislation to make First Nation policing services an essential service. They are nowhere to get it done. UCCM Tribal Police is building a new police station. We can't wait anymore as the recruitment process has commenced. We're dealing with a lot of issues within Manitoulin Island. It used to be a tourism area, now it becomes a haven for drug dealers. We've implemented a bylaw program to deal with trespassing and removal of unwanted individuals through court prosecutions, bylaws that were enforced by the Department of Indian Affairs in the day with no adequate funding. Collective implementing a drug strategy with new signage relating to drugs, installing cameras in our First Nations and plate readers to help deter the drug dealers. We operate a land-based treatment center. We are partners with neighboring police departments, and through negotiations obtain pension parity with a huge victory for all our police departments, which is helping us with the recruits. We continue to support the CHRT case against the government. Right now, policing is a federal mess with no other plans across this country other than keep talking with no results. We have no other alternative to offer a PSA, a provincial agreement, to ensure we can keep our communities safe. If the government of Canada is not willing to take into consideration the unique histories of Indigenous people striving for a more equitable approach to law enforcement, we'll continue with this slow and frustrating processes. I know the Truth and Reconciliation and the National Inquiry into Murdered and Indigenous Women was discussed today. With government needs to take these documents off the shelf and start implementing them, because right now we're in a crisis. You hear the deaths across our country. We're going to end up, I know COVID took a lot of people, but now we're taking our young people, which is our future. So I think we need to not have 6 to 7 years for a government to make a decision on making the police an essential service and start giving us adequate funding now, not 8, 9, 10 years down the road. So begrudge with that.
Miigwech Chief Corbière. Now the next speaker is Chief Jerry Swamp, the President for the First Nations Chief of Police Association. So I will now welcome Chief Swamp.
So Ekwego, Jerry Swamp Yunguts. My name is Jerry Swamp, and I extend my greetings, my thanks, and my acknowledgement, and my gratitude for being invited to the Assembly today. First Nation policing in Canada isn't something new. Some of our service have recently celebrated over 50 years in service to our communities. The current policing model on which the First Nation policing falls under is through public safety and a First Nation Inuit policing program. That current model started in 1991. In 1991, we had 58 standalone police services, First Nation police services, that were protecting our communities. Today, we have 36. Within the first few years of that policing model starting, we lost a number of First Nation police services, which means we lost a number of communities that were provided safety by our own people in our own way. In our policing and our models, in our funding agreements, it says we must provide adequate policing, culturally and responsive policing to our communities. This clause in our agreement, culturally responsive policing, I always wondered why they put that in a First Nation policing agreement. We're already culturally responding to our communities because we live the culture. How come they don't put that into mainstream model policing agreements? Maybe we wouldn't have the deaths that occurred last year. Maybe they'd have more training and more funding for the training and to provide those culturally sensitive policing. First Nation policing is looked at as a true community model of policing. And I say that because we are entrenched in our communities. We go to the ceremonies. We go to the alternative and diversion programs. We go and we coach many of our children's leagues, sports events. So we are entrenched in the community. No other police service in North America goes to a scene and speaks the language that is spoken to like we can. We provide that policing model, and that's the truest community policing model there is in North America. The last time I presented to the Assembly was I think it was 3 years ago in Ottawa. And it's, unfortunately, I'm giving the same message. Nothing really has changed in First Nation policing. Prime Minister Trudeau had mandated Minister Blair at the time, the Public Safety Minister, to legislate First Nation policing as an essential service, and to get that legislation going and get it co-developed with the Assembly of First Nation. We're on our fifth Public Safety Minister now, and there has been no movement. Those promises given to us, to our First Nation police leaders and our First Nation police service boards, has not been fulfilled. We still lack the resources and the commitment for our communities to provide that safety and security that every other Canadian citizen in Canada takes for granted. The Charter of Rights of Canada says it provides that safety and security for all Canadian citizens. Yet our communities don't have that same luxury. No other police service in North America or even Canada sits in the same situation that First Nation policing is. We are not classified as an essential service. We are funded by a program that could be taken away from us at any time. We have funding agreements that sometimes are only a year. The longest funding agreement we've had was 5 years. How can I commit a young Native individual who wants a career in protecting their community, a long career in policing, if I can only commit to the end of my current agreement, which may be next March 31st? We can't. That's why we are losing so many officers, because we can't commit to them a long career in policing. Yet we have dedicated officers that have fulfilled 30 years and 30 plus years policing their own communities. And that's because we are dedicated to our communities. We could have gone elsewhere and gotten higher salaries and higher pensions, but we decided to stay within our own First Nations because it's more important to us that our communities are safe and secure. There has been no changes in the legislation process, but there has been changes that are being made. And the changes are because of we've had to resort to litigation, human rights complaints. And some of the complaints are human rights actions that you'll hear in a little while. But our current leaders and our current police boards, they're not taking the status quo anymore. They're standing up and they're saying it's time to fight the government the way the government should be fought, through the courts. And through the courts process, we have had successes. We recently went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada says negotiating with First Nation police services in the funding and policing agreement Canada has the obligation of the honor of the Crown. So as a First Nation police leader, and as the president of the First Nation Chiefs of Police Association, that is my commitment that I'm going to be pushing to make sure that Canada has and continues that honor of the Crown for all of our services. We have over 1,500 First Nation police officers in Canada, and we're policing over 150 communities. Yet we still lobby for those First Nation communities that don't have police services. And it isn't until tragedies take place in Canada, in our communities, that Canada stands up and says, okay, we will give you money for security. There has been no enhancement, there has been no expansion of the First Nation Inuit policing program for a standalone police service since around 2006. And it wasn't until tragedies took place in our communities that the Prime Minister made promises. Why does it have to take a tragedy in our community for our communities to be safe? Our communities ask of our police services to respond to every and any incident that takes place, whether it's minor or whether it's serious. Our communities don't ask us if we're adequately funded or adequately resourced or adequately experienced. We don't have specialized services within our First Nation police services. It wasn't until we went to litigation that the minister relieved that terms and conditions in our funding agreements that we could have specialized services in our policing. That was 2 years ago. There has been no money that's been backing that up for our services. Our communities have on average 10% higher addiction rates when it comes to opiates. The same high average when it comes to deaths because of those opiates. We are seeing influxes of gangs coming into our communities and trafficking. You just heard the previous chief talk about Manitoulin Island. The crime severity index in some of those communities are way over 500 now because of the influx of these gangs coming in and trafficking to our people. Yet, we cannot have specialized services. And when we do have specialized services, we're robbing our community response model. We're robbing our frontline officers that are responding to calls on a day-to-day basis. Our officers are very well trained, and they have to be because they do investigations from A to Z. They don't turn it over to the next unit who specializes in drug trafficking, drug investigations, sexual assaults, homicides. Our officers are well trained and they do a professional, effective job, and they continue to do that for our communities. And they're being taken by other services because the draw for other services is that they can have a higher pension, they can have a higher salary, and they can specialize in one certain area instead of doing it all. We have over 1,500 police officers protecting our communities because we want to be there. We are dedicated to that safety and security. So we need AFN, we need the Assembly, we need every chief in the room to stand up for us and get this legislation pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Swamp. The next presenter is Maître Benoit Amiotte. He's a partner at Cain Lamar, and he's been practicing law for 20 years. He's the lead legal counsel for the Association of First Nations and Inuit Police Directors of Quebec in the complaint filed before the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. And he was also the lead attorney in the case Attorney General of Quebec versus the Pequot-Kamilnoits Takoigan. So please welcome Benoit Amiotte.